to the final episode of ADDAMS October. Actually, it is the final episode of the entire ADDAMS project. It is finally done. In this video, I'm going to show you the last few projects I have done to finish everything up. I'm also going to give you a final tour with all the dolls inside the house. And finally, I'm going to be wrapping up with some frequently asked questions and my final thoughts on finishing a project that has lasted this long. But before we move on to any new projects, I need to go back to last week's video where I admitted to you I wasn't very happy with the treasure room. So I asked for suggestions in the comments and you gave me some amazing suggestions, which really got me inspired, especially this suggestion, which got me to thinking about giving a hint of the vault with inside, like the columns that are in the movie inside the vault. Anyway, you'll see what I'm talking about. So let's get back into the treasure room. Just as Resin Bell's comment suggested, I wanted to give a hint or a nod to the fact that there might be an entire colonnade or an entire crypt behind the treasure room or the vault room that you can see in the dollhouse. In the movie, they have a gondola and they're going through these watered column arched areas, and so I just wanted 3 different arches that would be inside the room. I used a laser cutter to cut them out. I had previously measured inside the room. It's a pretty tight fit, so I decided to do 1 arch against the back wall and 2 arches against the side wall, and they are half columns because I want it to seem like the other half of the column is outside of the dollhouse walls. This ended up working out extremely well because I was inspired by a friend of mine's project where she used a mirror in the back of her project to make it look like the project extended further. So I decided to try and do the same thing. However, I didn't want the entire mirror to show because then when you looked into the room, you would see your own face staring back. So I thought if I could blot out the center of the mirror and make it look like it was descending into darkness the further you looked into it, that might work so you weren't looking at yourself, but it ended up not looking good at all. But thankfully I was just practicing on the film on top of the mirror, so I took the film off and decided to go with a curtain over the mirror. I also used the cutouts from the arches to create the top of the curtain shape. I'm going to glue the mirror onto the back of the arches. This is going to be easier to install than trying to put the mirror into the dollhouse itself. Instead of adding mirror all the way up to the top, I decided to add cardstock since it was going to be covered by drapes anyway. I added some black all around the edges just in case some of the white cardstock ended up showing through. Here you can see the curtain I created. I have an entire video on drapes if you want to see more specifically how I do the hemming and add a little bit of fringe to the drapes. But all I'm doing for this one is I'm cutting a drape that is a lot wider so that I can scrunch it up and make sure it has a lot of folds within the drape, and then I am folding it over the top so that it creates the curved shape matching the cutout of the arch. And this is the finished piece. All I have to do is add glue along the top and glue it into the open archway. Once that's done, it's just a careful process of gluing the rest of the drape to the mirror and trying to make it fold naturally. I'm also going to be using a small bit of ribbon to pull it back at the very bottom because I just want the bottom of the mirror to show. I just want it to look like the floor is extending past the back wall. Also, if you do try this, be sure to be very careful about adding glue over the mirror because any little bits of spills really gets on the mirror and it's extremely hard to get off. I will put the mirror material that I'm using in the description box below if you want to check it out. I also added a 1, 2, 3 block on the top of the curtain while I was working on the bottom. And as you can see, when I held it up on my mat, you can only see the bottom of the mirror, and when I put it into the dollhouse, I really like how it looks. Finally, I just have to age the curtain because obviously it's been hanging in a vault or a crypt for many, many years, and it's ready to go into the dollhouse. I also had several comments suggesting a rug, and previously in one of my videos I accidentally purchased some canvas material instead of fabric material, which is what I wanted. And I was told several times that this makes a really good rug, and I really did like the texture that it gave when I printed it out, but I had a hard time fraying the edges without just ruining the piece. So I decided to add some frayed black cotton fabric to make some fringe on the edge of the rug. Before adding the cotton frayed fabric, I just went with a Sharpie all around the edges to cover up the white edge that was created by the canvas material. Then all I had to do was add the frayed cotton fabric to the very edge of the rug so that that's all you could see, and then cut it to size. I did this for all 4 sides of the rug, and I'm pretty happy with the result. Something about this vault space at the very bottom of the dollhouse makes it incredibly difficult to film inside of it while I'm working. So I decided to take photos after each and every step so you could see what I was doing. I did add wallpaper in. You can see I added the first panel before I added the first column, and then I added the other columns onto the left side wall, and I am showing you here how the effect shows. It looks like the floor is extending past the columns, and it looks like there's light back there, so I really like the effect. I also added some wallpaper and tore at it so you could still see the bricks that were in the original room. I added a cap at the top of the columns, and then I had a gap at the other side, so I just stuffed some creepy cloth in there because I was tired at this point, but I like the effect anyway. Then I just aged everything to make sure it all looked cohesive. I added the light fixture back in, and I really like how it turned out. I like it so much better than it was before, and I added all the same pieces, so if you want to know more about the pieces in here, you can go watch last week's video. I did add a projector, which I will have to do an entirely other video on the projector because I started filming it and it was just way too long to add into this video, but I think it does, especially for people who love the first Addams Family movie, I think it definitely signifies this as the vault room where Gomez and Fester have a big scene where they're trying to talk about family, so I'm glad I took the time to make that piece and put it in here. As I've been finishing up the Addams Family project, I have been adding lights here and there. There are a few final rooms that need some lights, so let's put those in now. You may remember from previous videos that I have decided to do battery-powered lights, and I really do like the effect that they've given. One issue I'm having because I'm getting them from different places is some of them are cool colors, some of them are warmer colors. I did find that I could color on them with a Sharpie, but that's only if I could get to the bulb. Some of them I could unscrew the tops and get to the bulb, and some of them I couldn't. So I just kind of gave up on that and decided to leave them the colors they were, and I think it kind of gives the entire house an eerie feeling. Some of the rooms have more of a blue-green tint, some of them have a warm orange tint, and it really just is a little bit unsettling and weird. So it may just be me, but I think that adds to it. And if you've been following along, you know I've been sad that I haven't had a spider make an actual web in my house, and this final week I found my first web in the Addams Family house after 11 years. I was so excited, so I had to take video of it. If you're wanting more information on battery lights, I do have an entire video where I talk about installing battery-powered lights, and you can find that on my Addams Family playlist. I will also list the companies that I purchased these lights from, and thank you to my patrons for reminding me that I needed a porch light. I definitely almost forgot that, and when you see in a second I turn the lights off, it is a much-needed touch of, I guess, warmth for the front of the house. And also I really love seeing the lights shine through the windows. It just adds that extra bit of creepiness. As I was installing lights, I remembered I needed to add Lurch's pull cords. They do this all the time, especially in the TV show. There's a cord, and oftentimes it like comes out of the ceiling, like literally you see it come down from the ceiling, and they pull it and they call for Lurch. And I know it has different variations. I decided just to keep mine a plain cord. I'm not sure I'm completely happy with the braided look, but I'm not good with thread and making different types of patterns. So I just made a simple braid, and then I made these little cylinders with paper so that they would be able to hold the cord within it and be connected to the ceiling. And then I glued it at the top, and I'm just going to glue it inside of the little cylinder to create a super simple cord that can be attached to the ceiling. Then of course I'm just going to age it a little bit, and I did add these with some rubber cement, so if I decide to upgrade them a little bit later, or if I find a rope that I like a little bit better, then I can do that. So I will tell you, I have been enjoying using the rubber cement for attaching things. It's super easy to take off, but it takes forever to dry. So I came up with this method of shoving art supplies up to hold them until it is completely dry. I ended up installing 4 pull cords, one on each floor, so on the attic floor, the center floor in Gomez's office, and the living room, but then I added the 4th one to the dining room because I figured they'd probably have to call for Lurch in that room for sure. Oh, and I also wanted to show you I finally got around to aging the dining room chairs. Now it's time to finish up the living room, the heart of the home. There's not a lot to do in here because it's been fairly finished for a lot of the project. It's the first area that I focused on, but there are a few things missing, so let's work on those now. I created Thing and his iconic box back in a live stream maybe a year ago, but I never actually finished the box, and I just had this bottom part and I didn't have the top. Actually, I did make the top, and as soon as I finished remaking the top here on video, I found the top I made before. But that's fine. That happens when you don't finish your projects for over a year. You end up losing pieces. Well, I do at least. So I recreated the top of the box, and I folded up some black fabric to create the interior, and I chose black because I didn't want you to be able to see very far into the box. This is the Thing model that I created specifically to go inside of the box, and this is based off of the TV show. In the movies, he moves freely and he's a hand that's detached from a body. In the original Charles Addams cartoons, he was actually a full-grown man. It was a human where you only actually saw the hand come out. So it was a human that was hidden most of the time and you only just saw his hand. So it's kind of funny how that got translated to the iconic Thing that you see nowadays. I glued the lid onto the top of Thing and to the back of the box, and then I made some hardware just out of paper. I made a handle at the top and I made hinges at the back of the box, and this completes Thing's box for the living room area. Another item I decided to create, which is very specific to the 1960s TV show, is the ticker tape machine, which Gomez uses to check his stocks. I had this old clock in a dome that I wasn't really using for anything, and so I decided to try and make this look like the ticker tape machine. And I looked up some images and there were all sorts of different styles and models, and so I just decided to kind of fudge it, and I took some gears that I had, they're just buttons, some gears and some little embellishments, and I glued it to the face of the clock and at the bottom of the clock, and then I used an earring hook to go to the back to kind of look like some kind of handle. I just tried to make it look like a piece that had a lot of different parts that didn't really make sense, and that seemed to work out. When I put the photo on Instagram, people knew what it was, and so I'll call it passing for sure. It's definitely not an exact replica. I decided to use an old receipt to make the ticker tape paper that you always see coming out of the machine and curled up on the floor, and I just cut a very, very thin strip, and unless you have a CVS receipt, you might need to glue pieces together like I did to make a really long piece if you decide to make something like this. And then I wrapped it around the circular part of the clock, glued it down, and then I also glued the bottom part to the very bottom of the stand, and this is because the ticker tape comes out of the bottom of the machine. So this is how it's looking, and then the dome just fits on top, and I did glue that down just slightly. I can still get it off if I need to access the interior. I started to curl the receipt tape and then I knocked it over, and the entire top of the stand I put it on broke, which is fine because I'd rather it break now than later. It probably just wasn't a very well bonded glue, so I just added the glue back, and here's how the ticker tape looks once it's curled, and I'm just gonna let that kind of fall all over the floor. I glued it back together with some super glue, and now it's definitely stronger than it was before. Now that I have those two final pieces done, I can put everything into the living room. I did want to pull out a few pieces to show you that have been in there for a very long time, before my YouTube channel even started. This is the organ for Lurch, and I do have the Addams Family crest on the back that's from the first movie. It looks a little goofy, but this is one of my very first miniatures and I still love it. I created the keys so that they can move. I have Morticia's chair, which I made from embroidery thread, and I have the polar bear that I made from polymer clay. They always had a stuffed bear in the front of their house. I also have the two-headed turtle that I made a long time ago, and I just love his little feet at the bottom. I think they're really cute. Oh, and you may also notice that I have the swordfish with the man's foot hanging up at the back. I hung that up during my gluing video, but I forgot to show you. I do have a video on how I made that piece. Now it's time to add a thing in the box onto the table in the center of the room, and I'm also going to add the ticker tape machine. I'm going to add this behind Gomez's chair, as it is definitely his piece that needs to go in there. I had these pillows that were sent to me by Lindsay, who had also sent me all the books for the library, and they work just perfect on the couch. I've had this little statue of a caveman for forever. He's been in my project for the longest time, and so I decided to add him back in. I also have these canes and umbrellas that were purchased for me by my dad at a miniature show we went to together, and Chris, one of my friends, sent me this elephant foot umbrella holder, which is iconic in the TV show, so thank you for sending that to me. And now the canes and the umbrellas have the perfect spot to hang out in the Addams living room, and I will definitely save this little porcelain piece for another project, but I think this is much more Addams-like to go into the project, and I am so excited about it. So here's the final room with the chandelier installed, and it's one of the first rooms I ever worked on, and it's just exactly what I had envisioned, and I am so happy with the final result. Now I do have a surprise for everyone. I did something I said I wasn't going to do, and you get to see it now. Now before you get too excited, I am not making Pubert in this video. I know I'm trying to finish things up and this is the final video, but it does take me a complete week to make a doll. I didn't want to put that kind of pressure on myself, but for now he is represented in the family with a little bassinet, and I will show you how I made that, and if I do end up adding a Pubert doll in the future, you will be able to see those photos on my Instagram or Facebook page. So let's get started. I had considered creating Pubert's crib from scratch to match the on-screen crib perfectly. However, I remembered I had this old crib in my collection and I wasn't doing anything with it, and so I'd rather use something I already had that doesn't have a purpose than create something new. So I decided to do the trick where I use little punches, and I used a Halloween cat and a bat punch to go all the way around the crib to create a little pattern. Then in the original crib it had this I want to say bonnet, or anyway, this cover that goes over the top of the crib, and so I wanted to add that. And to do that, I used a piece of cardstock, I added glue, folded it over so it was a double thickness, and then let it dry around a paint bottle so that it had a curved finish when it was done. Then I just glued it inside of the crib, and I had that little cover on top of the bassinet like I wanted. Even though I wasn't building the crib from scratch, I still wanted it to resemble the one you see in the movie, so it is immediately recognizable. Pubert's crib has a very grayish tone to it, and then it has a black cloth that goes over the top, which helps give it its creepy vibe. So I wanted to stick with those colors and also make sure that it looks very old and aged, as I imagine it was probably used in the family for years and years for every single ADDAMS. I wanted to add a lining on the inside, so similarly to the way I did for Things box, I just folded up some black fabric into a rectangle and then glued it into the bottom of the crib. Hopefully one day it will hold a little baby Pubert inside of it. I'm using the same creepy cloth that I've used in other projects. It's the stuff you can get from the dollar store. I'm just cutting a length of it and I'm folding it in half so it's just a little bit thicker, and I'm going to glue that on top of the cardstock arch that I added earlier. I had painted it black so you couldn't see anything underneath the creepy cloth where you could see through it. Then I'm just cutting any of the remaining loops and pulling down on the cloth fabric so it looks like the little thread tendrils are hanging down. Now, of course, I can't officially call it Pubert's crib unless it has a creepy, slightly dangerous mobile hanging above it. So I took a craft stick and cut 2 1-inch lengths and then created a cross with those. I'm using a hand drill to drill through the center, and then I'm also going to drill a hole at the end of each length so that I can add items to the mobile. Once that's finished, I'm going to take a earring back. It's like a earring hook, and I made it a little bit straight. I used this, well, and then I flipped it across the table, but I used this as the top of the mobile because it already has like a nicely made loop and a little decorative bead, so it just makes the piece look a little bit more finished. Now I'm going to take some embroidery thread and I'm going to pull it apart. It usually has 6 strands, and so I'm pulling off 1 strand and forcing it to go through the holes at the end. And then I'm just going to tie a double knot so that I know it's not going anywhere. I'm also adding a little drop of glue so that the knot won't come undone. I have these pre-made knives and forks. I know they're not very sharp. Hubert might be a little disappointed, but he's just a baby and I'm a mom, and so we're going with the butter knife. It's gonna be okay. I added glue to the handles of each of the utensils and then wrapped the embroidery thread around it and then cut off the excess. And now I have 4 little utensils hanging from the mobile. All that's left to do is add some black paint and it's done. In order to hang it above the crib, I also needed to add some wire, so I just bent it into the shape that I wanted it to be, and I had left this back part of the crib on the same side as the bonnet area. I left that blank. I glued on the wire and then added some cardstock over it so it was reinforced, and then painted that. There's a hook on the other end of the wire so that the mobile hangs at the top. Now Pubert's crib is ready to go into the attic. And I also added some bats hanging from the top of the attic, and I think it just really gives it a whimsical look. Of course, we have baby's first cannon there at the bottom. He's at the very top. There's a big cannon you can see through the opening, but he also needs his baby cannon. And then I also added a little toy for him to play with up on the roof. Safest place for the baby, obviously. There's a few other items up here. I have a telescope and I have the cauldron for whenever it's Christmas time and they need to welcome their carolers. I also have this item which was given to me a very long time ago by my friend Rosanna, and she sent me a picnic set for the Addams family, and so I thought the roof was the perfect place to put this because they love moon bathing. The set actually has glow in the dark thread, and it comes with a placemat for each person that's in the shape of a bat and some personalized plates. So I think it's just a really fun piece to add to the roof. And hopefully, you know, as I go through the seasons, I can set up different scenes and post those to my Instagram. So maybe we'll have to do a moon bathing theme on the roof. So here is Pubert's room, finally. One of the last little details that I needed to finish up was adding doll stands so that all my dolls can stand up. These are the stands that I ended up ordering. They're a little bit small for 6-inch dolls, but I prefer this because I really don't like my stands to be super huge. So these are the perfect size to go around a leg instead of a hip or a waist. I've also learned from a doll class that I took that you can cut off the rounded parts that go around the hips. You can turn this entire clip upside down so it's just sticking up, and this is the perfect shape to go up the back of a pant leg or a jacket. I did find it was a little short for large, but I will put a link to these in the description if you wanted to check them out. Nicely dressed Era forgot to tell you that I wanted to add a medallion to the front of the house, so editing Era is telling you now. I was inspired by the most recently animated Addams Family house. They had an A medallion on the front, and I just really liked how it looked. And I think it just really gave a distinctive look. I mean, it can't belong to anybody else. It's the Addams Family house. It's not just a random haunted house. Well, I guess it could be Era's house because it is my house. Anyway, I decided to paint it as though it was a metal medallion and then age it with some watered down paint. And then I added some white on top, very similar to the way I did the doors for the kids on the side of the house. Just wanted to make it look like really old metal that's been hanging up there for a while. I decided to add it on the tower between the second floor and the attic floor, and all I really had to do was glue it onto the siding, and then I added some moss around it because I figured like birds would be making nests, and just general trying to age it into the project. I always suggest to age it in. If it's been there for a while, it's going to have collected dirt and all sorts of things, and so that was really fun to do. I also went through and added a little bit more moss to the shutters and the outside of the house. You can never have too much moss. Moss is amazing. So now that I have the stand situated, I'm going to put all the dolls in the house and we're going to do one final tour. hope you enjoyed the tour. I am going to answer a few frequently asked questions now. It's going to be in the format of a Q&A. I'm gonna let myself sit down for this part. First question. Why the Addams Family? I really love the spooky aesthetic, and honestly, the first house I purchased was an Allison Jr., which is the center part of this house, and it immediately looked to me like the Addams Family house, and I had such good memories of growing up watching the black and white TV show. And then I remember, I think I was in 3rd grade when the first movie came out, and I don't know why, but I wanted to be Wednesday. I would practice like not smiling, and I was never good at it. The Addams Family is just a loving family who wants to live in a spooky house and just be themselves. And I think that's amazing. How long did this take you? I'm looking at my original blog, which I will put in the description box below because it does start at the very beginning of this project. So if you wanted to see the very beginning stages, you can check it out. I started this project in April of 2019, which means I have officially been building this house for 11 plus years. Would you do it again if you knew it would take 11 years? Yes, but I hope whoever told me this is going to take you 11 years would also tell me you're going to be living a lot of other life events during these 11 years. This project is older than both of my children. I've had 3 different jobs during the time I've been building this. I've lived in 2 different homes. I have most of my marriage, this project has been around. I have a ton of memories of my children playing on the floor near me while I am building this. There was even a time when I was pregnant with my first child that the thought of making miniatures made me physically ill, and I actually ended up having to overcome that. The polar bear is actually a pretty special piece because of that whole story. It was the first miniature I made after I had my first child, and she was a little bit older, and it was the first miniature that I felt not sick to make. That sounds weird, but it didn't make me physically ill to think about sitting down and working on something. And I sat down and I worked on this bear until 3 or 4 in the morning, and I kept thinking, okay, she's gonna wake up any moment. She's gonna wake up in the middle of the night any moment, and I'm gonna have to, I'm gonna be exhausted. I don't have any sleep, but I didn't care. It was my passion for this art form coming back, and so for that reason, this bear is pretty special. It was kind of my return to miniatures after probably at least a year not touching anything. I also wanted to share this photo. You may remember when I started my channel, we had Audrey. This was my sweet little pup that passed away while I was working on the abandoned coffee shop. And this is a picture of her when she was a puppy when I started this project. After she passed away, we waited for a little bit, and then we got Stormy, which you know now. And this is a picture of her standing on the same exact floor, but you can see how much the project has changed around our pups. And just another one of those things where time has passed, life has happened while I've been working on this project, and so little memories and things are going to be woven into this project that no one else is going to know. Everyone else is just going to see, oh, it's the Addams Family house. Oh, I recognize that from the movie. I recognize that from the show. But I'm going to say, I recognize this from a significant moment in my life that had to do with my children and my family life and coming back to my creativity after I had been out of it for so long. How does it feel to finish a project that is this big and took this long? I don't think it has sunk in yet, is what I'm thinking. My top brain cells, or like my surface brain cells that kind of realize that it's finished, it feels really good. I at first felt like it was taking too long, or I felt like ashamed that it was taking too long, and this stemmed from just not many, just a few comments talking about like, wow, you spent this much time on this. But you know what? I think it's fine. I've enjoyed every moment. And if I had really pushed myself through those moments that I wasn't enjoying it, I may not be sitting here with a finished project. I may have quit. I may have said, I'm not enjoying this at this moment. I don't want to do this. I give up. So I think what I've learned from this is it's okay to take my time. And if I'm not enjoying this project, I can go work on the captain's quarters, or I can work on the fairfield, or I can take a break and play video games, or go bake a cake, or go play with the puppy. Yes, I see you. So it feels good. Definitely feels like an accomplishment. What's your favorite piece that you've made? That is difficult. One of my favorite pieces has to be the electric chair. I made it so early on, and it's still really one of my favorite pieces. And I actually do have a video where I show how I made this. I made like a new one because I made this before I started my YouTube channel. I made a new one and did a giveaway, but it does show you how I made this. So it's not a complicated miniature, but I really enjoyed making it. Another one that I really enjoyed was the Iron Maiden. Just, you know, all the torture devices. I enjoyed the Iron Maiden. It's made out of paper towels, and it was one of the first times I really started experimenting with alternative materials, and it's still holding up. Like, it's made out of paper towels, and after, I don't know, maybe I made that 3 years ago or 4 years ago, it's still holding up. All the pieces are still functioning. I did at one point have to re-glue a hinge back on, but you know, it's still functioning. There are things I would do a little bit different now, but yeah, so those are some of my favorite things that I've made. And all the dolls, I had so much fun making dolls. I never thought I would be a doll person, but after having to make 7 family members, it has turned me into a doll person. I want to make one. How do I start? So I will kind of give you a map of what the house consists of. All the additions that I've added on that are not a kit have a video that I show you how I made it, except for the long dark hallway. So the center part of the house is the Allison Jr. The side part here is the, I think it's like the 2-bedroom add-on, and then there is a part right here in the center. This is the long dark hallway that I added on. It's in my blog if you want to check it out. It doesn't have like detailed directions, but it's in there. And then the conservatory is a conservatory kit from Real Good Toys. And so 1, 2, 3 kits. And then this is a long dark hallway in between. And then I added on, Buster's room is above the 2-room add-on, and Cousin It's room is above the conservatory. So those were my add-on pieces. The rest of them are kits from Real Good Toys. And also, I almost forgot, there's a basement add-on, and this little rolly cart was custom built by one of my friends. I designed it and I showed him exactly what I wanted, and I wanted the basement to like slide out, which it does, and then there's cabinets that open so I can store all the miniatures if I decide to take it to a show or something. All of that to say, if you do want to make your own Addams Family house, I would start with the Allison Jr. or a kit similar to it with a tower in the center and see how much you want to create. And I also want to make sure and clarify that all the items that are within the house I have collected and made over a span of 11 years. So I think a lot of people look at finished projects and they think, I could never do this, I could never create this, this would take so much time and so much money, and it does, but when you span it out over 11 years, it really doesn't feel that way. So if you do want to create something like this, don't feel intimidated by the finished project. It took me 11 years to get here with several life breaks in between. What are you going to do with it now? So my plan for the house now is to enjoy it for a little while. It's been a project. There's something definitely different between a project and a final piece that you can sit and enjoy. So I do want to enjoy it and just kind of bask in its doneness for a little bit. But I think it would be really fun to see if there were some miniature museums out there that would like to display it. I don't know. It would just be like a loan and they could show it for a little while. I don't know if this is something that any museum would be interested in, but I think it would be fun. Another question I had is, can I buy it? I have a lot of people asking if they can buy it, which is super flattering, but at the moment I don't have any plans on selling it because there are so many memories wrapped up in this project. It's very personal to me. I just currently don't have any plans on selling it. And honestly, as I was getting ready for this week, thinking about everything that I've gone through during this project, I really started tearing up, and I didn't think that I was going to be emotional about it. But when you think about how much life goes by while you're working on these huge projects and everything that you put into it, I mean, a lot of times miniature projects become an escape from stress. It becomes something very personal. And of course, this project has been a huge staple on my channel, which, by the way, I want to say thank you so much for 40,000 subscribers. We hit that milestone this week, which just blows my mind. And I really have a hard time believing that many people want to watch my channel. But I think part of it, or at least part of the initial draw, was the Addams Family project. It's a recognizable project, and so for that I am so thankful, and this will always be a special project for that reason, that it's grown this community that I really cherish. I cherish you all. Okay, final question, will you ever work on it again? There probably will be things that I will do here and there. I do have a friend who is making me like a real wicker chair for Morticia, and of course Pubert I will make at some point, but I do feel a little bit of just relief. It doesn't feel like an unfinished project, like sitting and staring at me anymore. So yes, I will probably work on it again. I've had several suggestions of how to expand it, like to make the ballroom and make all the Addams Family extended family and put them in the ballroom. And so I'm never gonna say that a project or an idea is off the table. I would never say that. But for now, I'm pretty happy to close the book on this one for a little bit. Doesn't mean I won't open the book again in the future, but there are so many. I have just like the longest list of projects that I want to do on this channel and just in my miniature journey, that it's kind of nice to wrap up some of the lingering projects so I don't feel like I'm just jumping from project to project and none of them are ever ending. So for now, I'm calling it done, and yeah. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey, this Addams Family mini mansion journey. I honestly cannot believe that it's done. But just because this project is done, don't think the spooky miniature fun is over. I have a new pop culture project in mind, and my leggings, which you can't see, might be a little clue. We are going to be starting the Beetlejuice house in 2021. I'm not going to start it in the next couple months, give myself a break, catch up on my other projects like the captain's quarters, and finish up the cardboard house, but I will be starting a Beetlejuice house, and I haven't decided if it's going to be from scratch or from kits. I'll kind of do some research and let you know. I need to do a little bit in the research phase before we get started on that. But I hope you are excited about it. I am excited about it, especially that little diorama thing that goes in the attic. That's going to be so fun. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next one. Oh, and happy Halloween. Be safe out there. Bye. Happy Halloween. Sometimes she just sits at the doggy door and just hits the door because she wants attention, especially while I'm filming. It's so nice. Thank you for that. You're so sweet.